Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. My name is Amber Whittington, and I have the honor of being today's host. But before we get into the show, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm an online content creator, also known as a social influencer. I'm a host, and at the foundation of it all, I'm an activist. I create content hoping to inspire people to want to be the best versions of themselves. I spread self-love and self-confidence in hopes that people realize that they have a voice and that it matters and that they should use it. Ending homelessness is so important to me because every single human deserves to lay down in a bed at night and feel safe. I'm excited to get into today's program because today is all about lifting up the stories of women. We'll spend some time reflecting on the challenges and the traumas that unhoused women face, but we'll also celebrate the spirit of resiliency. Women are amongst the most vulnerable subpopulations experiencing homelessness. Without a safe home, women are often the target of sexual violence, physical assault, victimization, and exploitation. Accessing mental and physical health care, specifically reproductive health care, is nearly impossible. Wondering how you're going to feed your child or provide them with a safe place to sleep at night is an unfathomable reality that women living outside have to face each and every day. And these are just a few of many challenges that women experiencing homelessness face. I encourage us to listen to today's stories with an open mind and an open heart. It takes all of us to create a better future for all. It takes all of us to fight for solutions that help us end homelessness. So with that being said, let's get into the program. Please help me welcome today's first speaker, Susan Burton. Susan is the founder and president of a New Way of Life Reentry Project. Drawing on personal experiences, she started the organization in 1998 and dedicated her life to helping others to break the cycle of incarceration. Welcome, Susan.
My name is Susan Burton. I am founder and president of A New Way of Life. But I want to talk a little bit about before I became founder of A New Way of Life. I was a young woman living in Los Angeles County, and one day I was struck by grief. I lost my son. He was accidentally ran over, and that day my life spiraled out of control, and I became homeless in Los Angeles County. What I needed was help, and it took so long to receive that help. But once I did receive the help, I started A New Way of Life Reentry Project. During the period that I was homeless, I traveled in and out of prisons and jails. Every time I was released, I looked for a way up, a way out, a way to rebuild my life, as so many homeless people do in Los Angeles County. So I finally received the help, and I started helping other women who were getting off the bus from incarceration to create a new life. I gave them the supports that they need, and the same supports that I needed so many times. So today, what I would say about A New Way of Life is that it's a homeless prevention service and a service that allows women being released from incarceration to rebuild their lives, reunite with their children, find jobs, get training, seek higher education. This is such an effective approach to preventing homelessness and helping homeless to get back on their feet. Through the years, there was so much pain, suffering, and trauma that I experienced while homeless. And I think about all of those who are homeless and what they're going through. Come on, LA County. We've got to do better. We need to do better. It's our social responsibility to do better. My name is Susan Burton, and I'm your neighbor.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for starting a New Way of Life project. And also, thank you for calling out Los Angeles County for not doing enough. We need to keep encouraging and pushing them to do more. And now I would like to introduce our next speaker, who is Madison Williams of Alexandria House. Alexandria House is a nonprofit that provides safe and supportive housing for women and children to get off the streets. Madison is also the founder of Can't Be Stopped Dance Company, which is an organization that provides opportunities for young girls experiencing housing instability to get involved in dance, gymnastics, and other activities. Please welcome Madison.
Ever since I could remember, it was always just me and my dad. My mom wasn't in the picture. And my dad died when I was 9 years old, and I lived with my stepmom. Then between the ages of 12 and 15, I ended up living with my aunt and uncle in Long Beach. Believe it or not, I even played football when I was in Long Beach with my aunt and uncle for Milliken High. I originally went up to the school to try out for the volleyball team, but a coach made a rude and sexist comment, so I joined the football team to prove a point. At 15 and a half, I moved in with my mom. I kind of wanted to try to make it work. All my life I didn't have a mom, so I wanted to have a mom. She struggled with drug addiction, and I just don't think she was prepared to be a mom of a teenager. So by 17, I was homeless on the streets of Hollywood. I ended up getting into a youth shelter until I was 18. At 18, I found myself in a domestic violence relationship and found out I was pregnant with my oldest daughter. Because I never had a real mom and I didn't know how to be a mom, I put myself into parenting class at my friend's place. My friend's place is a drop-in shelter for youth 13 through 21. And I was working with that parenting class. I've worked with that parenting class for years. When my daughter was a year, I found myself really homeless yet again. And Erin Casey, the director of the parenting class, sent me to Alexandria House. She referred me there, and moving into Alexandria House when my daughter was a year and a half years old was life-changing. Not only was it a nice, safe space to get my life together, it provided me a community and helped me with everything. I left Alexandria House August 2010 in the Housing Choice Voucher Program. The Housing Choice Voucher Program lets you pay 30% of your income, and they pay the rest of your rent. So you're able to actually, move into a nice apartment. Now, it sounds great, but it isn't always that easy. It's really hard to get somebody to rent to you. There's a stereotype. It's associated with tenants that aren't the best tenants, that are causing problems, are loud. So it's really, really hard to get, if you're trying to get into a really good neighborhood, it's really hard for people want to rent to you. What I found is easy is I find the neighborhood that I want to be in, and I just go up and down the streets and call all the for lease for rent signs, and I explain to them who I am, what I'm doing, how this voucher program helps me, how it's helped my kids, and the benefits that it does for the actual landlords. And how it helps me is because I don't have to spend my whole day in life working 3 and 4 jobs. I can actually be a great parent to my kids. The Alexandria House has helped and encouraged me to find my passion, find what I'm good at. Instead of working a dead-end job, they brought out what I was most passionate about, what I really wanted to do in life. And they encouraged me, and they set me on the right path. So I was able to start the CBS dance company, the Can't Be Stopped dance company. My daughter has flourished. The Alexandria House is her biggest supporter. She's a competitive cheerleader, dancer, and gymnast, along with my youngest daughter. My oldest 13-year-old is an ambassador to the Black Girls Cheer organization, blackgirlscheer.org, and she often helps out and volunteers her time and gives back to the Alexandria House community. I'm Madison Williams. I'm your neighbor.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, Madison. It's so important for us to inspire and provide opportunities to the next generation of women that are following in our footsteps. With that being said, I want to introduce our next speaker. Trevor has been successfully renting to tenants on Section 8 and other assistance programs for 30 years. He strongly believes in the concept of community to which we, landlords and tenants, and those needing assistance, and those blessed to provide assistance, all share, independent of color or gender. Please welcome Trevor.
We've heard a lot about you, and Alexandria House told us about the tenant that they have, who's in your Section 8 apartment in one of your buildings. But we didn't know that you are a famous, well-renowned jazz player here in Los Angeles.
Oh, is that what the interview is about? I didn't know.
Yeah, maybe we should go that direction, because it's probably a little more fun.
It might be. But this is more important.
Yeah, there we go.
All right.
So I'd like to know how you got started doing the Section 8 program. You know, what drove you to do this?
Well, it's probably by accident. I think that is the answer, is by accident. This is 30 years ago. I had a summer. We talked about me being a musician, right? I had a summer, and at the end of the summer, I had $10,000. That was long money. I thought that's the world, So I was thinking, what am I going to do with this money? As we discussed, I had a little bit of financial education. So I went to see a friend of mine who was a doctor. He sent me to see his financial advisor. And the financial advisor said, well, where's your house? Where do you own a house? I go, I don't own a house. He goes, well, meeting over. Go buy a house with your money. But I was young. I'd always lived in an apartment. I grew up in a house with my family, but I was used to apartments. I lived right over here on Lemert, and it turned out on the end of the street was a place for sale, a triplex, and I ended up taking that $10,000 and buying that 3-unit building.
You said 80% of your units are Section 8.
Yeah, I recalculated. It's 90.
90.
It's 90. I have 10 units, so I have 9 tenants on assistance. They're not all Section 8. Some are different kind of, but 9 out of 10 are assistance, and 8 out of 10 are female head of household. This is all part of me just being a member of my community. I live in this neighborhood too,
Yeah.
And we need places for people, especially single moms, to raise families. We have that challenge. We've had that challenge in our community for a long time. But we don't have a lot of landlords, I find, who are making, kids tear stuff up and things break, and that's one reason that landlords don't like to rent to families that have kids. But if we're going to build community, we need to have families. But I want a family who's going to stay for 10 years and raise their kids in this neighborhood and really have an interest in the neighborhood. So I listed the property on Go Section 8, which is a website Section 8 has, and I assumed that that Alexandria House saw it on that listing. They called me, and they were making the case for this tenant, and they were talking about the supportive services that had been provided. They told me quite a bit about her background. And it was interesting and intriguing, and I had already been for years. I've worked with Section 8 and Brilliant Corners and other kind of support systems. So hearing about Alexandria House, I was open to the idea, and it actually got a great tenant out of it, fantastic tenant.
Awesome.
So it worked for everybody, I think, or it's working for everybody. We want to support tenants, and some tenants come to us. They're on aid because they have a certain financial circumstance that's difficult. But there are tenants that just have never rented before, or don't know the process, or have had work trouble, etc. There's a whole lot of reasons people have challenges with housing, But as a landlord, I get to listen to them. I get to hear them, and what I'm looking for is this going to be a tenant that's going to fit into the circumstance, fit into the character of the building and the other tenants that they have there, and certainly are they going to be able to pay rent? But when they've got assistance, it takes away that question, are they going to be able to pay rent? We know that's going to happen. And while they may be paying a small portion, these people on assistance, they know what a great deal they've got. They're not going to mess up by not paying that small portion where the majority is being paid, by through some assistance. So, these tenants on assistance are some of the best tenants I've ever had. If you're looking to help people, there are a number of programs out there that as I said, as a landlord, make sure you're going to get your rent. And all you need to do is find the right tenants that fit into your building.
Right.
In my experience, a lot of these people are being productive and contributing. They just do it at a level where they don't have a lot of income. If you make a choice to be a preschool teacher, you've made a double choice, right? You're not going to make much money, and you're going to be one of the most critical members of our neighborhood. So that's a challenge. We need to support people like that who are doing the work of building community and need a little support themselves as a result. My daughter in Chicago, she now owns property and is renting there with the same kind of philosophy. So it's not just something that can be done here, or not something to be done with men, or not something that can be done with old people. If you have an interest in your community, you can buy a place. This is another thing that I do. I take the gangbangers off the street. They see me out here. They don't believe that I'm the owner, but I go to them and talk to them, and I buy their mixtape, and it introduces a conversation, right?
Yeah.
They end up saying, well, you own this place? What? Yeah, I'm like, you can own it too. All this hustling you're doing on the street, if you hustle like that in the real estate game, you're a millionaire without worrying of looking behind you, right?
Yeah.
And you've helped your grandmother, your great-grandmother, your aunties, your cousins. It's an option that I want to make sure that people see is available to them. Nobody's out there in the street teaching that, but it's an option. It's an opportunity for all of us.
What would you say to landlords as far as the Section 8 program?
I'd say it's probably the most consistent money you're going to get. It's the government putting a check in your account every month on the first of the month like clockwork. You don't have to chase tenants for any of that. You don't have to chase anybody for any of that. It's in your bank account. Now, you can talk to your tenants about the smaller portion and set your rules around that. But again, it's such a small portion that they're going to be paying so much less. They know not to mess that up. I've been renting to Section 8 tenants for 30 years. I've had a really, really strong, profitable experience, but also a great experience helping people.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that?
I'm not seeing nothing wrong with that. Yeah, feels good to me.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah.
This is great.
All right, good,
Yeah,
good.
it's such a pleasure to meet you.
Well, thanks.
Thank you, Trevor. That was very helpful and insightful. And next, I'm so excited to introduce our next performer, Suzette Shaw. Suzette is a poet, feminist, CSH Speak Up advocate, and grassroots advocate for Skid Row. Through her advocacy, Suzette represents the concerns of women displaced into poverty and homelessness. She was recently chosen as California State Senator Holly Mitchell's Woman of the Year. And we are so honored to have her with us today to perform a spoken piece. Please welcome your neighbor, Suzette.
Standing tall for dignity and equality. I'm not a liberated woman, as I am just a woman who yearns to live free. In fact, I wish to live free from the bondage of inequality. I'm just so longing for equality that is yet to be. Sure, we've come far, but how far we have yet to come. Women are still striving for their equal sum. Whether we're sitting in the White House, Donald Trump Plaza, or up in Beverly Hills, to the lows of the Appalachians, the rundown sawmills, or the Catskills. Whether your zip code is in Manhattan, New York, or right here in Skid Row. Human dignity should not come at the price for only those who can afford concierge prices and exquisite means. And I humbly tell you, my voice, it is my power. It fuels me each day. In fact, it gives me the strength which surpasses none. Instead, it allows me to be more of my equal sum. But please know, I am just one voice, and I've won no battles. The battles they've yet to be won. This voice is just another gift God gave to me so I can stand tall for dignity and equality. My name is Suzette Shaw. I am your neighbor.
Wow, please give it up for Suzette one more time. That was a beautiful performance. And next, we're going to hear from Suzanne Kolkowitz, who is a survivor, advocate, and resident manager at Downtown Women's Center. Suzanne has personally experienced homelessness and now serves as a CSH Speak Up advocate working towards system change. Please welcome Susan.
It's 9 p.m. and my storage unit is about to close. I feel a growing sense of dread, and I check my backpack, my pants pockets, my jacket pockets, making sure I have the essentials. I visit the restroom, then I slip out the front gate, heading south on Sawtelle toward Venice Boulevard, where I get on the first bus of the first leg of a long night of riding the bus. And each night I would find myself looking up at the windows of the apartment buildings surrounding me, and I'd see blue flickering lights from TVs. I'd see shadows against the closed blinds as people moved from room to room. And it was heart-wrenching for me. Why do all these people get to be safe and inside and not me? And at 56 years old, how is it possible that I have no home and nowhere to go? But I have to choke back all that pain because I have a whole night of surviving to do, and I can't do it with tears in my eyes. My name is Susan Kolkowitz, and I'm a CSH Speak Up advocate. And 6 years ago, that was my reality. Before experiencing homelessness, I'd been successful. I worked a six-figure job. I had a lovely place on the west side and a sapphire blue Acura. But after 3 years of domestic violence, everything changed. He'd already taken all my money, my jewelry, along with the sense of myself as a capable, valued person. And when he was taken into police custody, I was left homeless. I was left alone and outside, trying to figure out how to survive. I was overwhelmed and needed help. The only benefit program I'd ever heard of was food stamps. So I Googled it and found that I could get them from the Department of Public Social Services, or DPSS as it's known. And I went there, and the same day I left with today's version of food stamps, or electronic benefits transfer, EBT card. 4 weeks later, general relief kicked in, and together it wasn't very much, but it took the edge off the desperation of my situation. Then I was referred by DPSS to the Edelman Westside Mental Health Center. I didn't realize, I guess, how traumatized I'd been because I'd been so focused on just surviving. I was assigned a case manager, Sarah, who was direct but warm, and she was confident. She was confident that finding a home for me was doable. I would walk out of my visits with her a little bit stronger, a little more like Susan. And through her, I began seeing a psychiatrist and started attending a weekly Seeking Safety group for domestic violence survivors. And she found me an emergency bed at Daybreak Shelter in Santa Monica. It only lasted for 14 days, but the services that I received sustained me through the rest of my homelessness. So by November, I'd been living outside for 365 days. I was considered chronically homeless, and I was finally eligible for housing assistance, and I was accepted into Daybreak's interim housing shelter. And I felt so incredibly grateful to have a safe place to sleep every night. Well, I stayed at Daybreak for almost 5 months, and then on March 15th, 2015, I took everything out of my storage unit and moved into permanent supportive housing, my new home. Permanent supportive housing was where I could start to reclaim the pieces of my life, where I again started to feel confident and capable and like a person who contributes to the world. I'm now a certified mental health advocate. I'm an advocate with the Domestic Violence Homeless Services Coalition, and I'm employed by the Downtown Women's Center. I have found that the things that caused me the most pain and the most shame became, through advocacy, the most shame reducing and healing. And that allows me to focus on helping those still outside, those still suffering, still waiting. Please continue to support and fight for programs like permanent supportive housing and new solutions like rapid rehousing for domestic violence survivors. I'm here as proof that they work, that they lift people up, that they turn lives around. These programs provide the foundation for people to not only survive the trauma they've experienced, but to heal, to connect, and to move on. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Now we're going to hear from the CEO of Downtown Women's Center, Amy Turk. The Downtown Women's Center is the only organization in Los Angeles that focuses exclusively on serving and empowering women facing homelessness and formerly homeless women. Please welcome your neighbor, Amy.
Hi all, I'm Amy Turk. A little over 20 years ago, I moved from Denver and off to college in Los Angeles. As a bright-eyed freshman, I became involved in a lot of social efforts, from leading the National Homelessness and Hunger Awareness Week to getting involved in political races. I spent a lot of time at the independent bookstore Midnight Special in Santa Monica, listening to authors like Bell Hooks and following Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. Intersectional work kept emerging as areas of my interest, especially where systems of oppression converge with women's issues. This prompted further education and ultimately becoming a licensed clinical social worker. That same freshman year, I had a conversation that profoundly moved me. As a volunteer, I had just finished preparing a meal at the People Concerns Daybreak Shelter and sat down to enjoy it alongside a woman who was days away from moving into permanent supportive housing. Her life challenges were complex and apparent, but what affected me most profoundly was her resilience, as she shared her joy at having finally established security through a new home. This opportunity to learn how one woman could rebuild her life ignited my belief in the power of women supporting one another. It launched a lifelong commitment to ending homelessness and was the first of many experiences that have prepared me to assume the position of Chief Executive Officer at Downtown Women's Center just last year. When the Downtown Women's Center opened its doors in 1978, we were the first organization in the country to focus exclusively on serving women. Our mission is to end homelessness for women throughout the greater Los Angeles area through housing, healthcare, employment, and our advocacy work. In Los Angeles, women's homelessness is rising every year at a rate outpacing men's. Amidst a persistent gender pay gap and historic housing unaffordability, roughly half of women experiencing homelessness today are newly homeless, as a variety of economic barriers and experiences of interpersonal violence and domestic violence continue to put single women at greater socioeconomic risk than men. These insecurities have only been exacerbated since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, with related job losses disproportionately impacting women and spikes in domestic violence. These trends threaten to push more women into homelessness than ever before. Unaccompanied women in particular, who cannot seek assistance on behalf of families, will be left to navigate the injustices of homelessness without adequate support. For many, and especially those who are Black, Brown, Indigenous, and/or LGBTQIA+, the consequences will be dire. Unhoused women in Los Angeles live on average 35 years less than women in stable housing. These troubling trends highlight the urgent need to designate unaccompanied women as a recognized subpopulation. And through female elected leadership, we have been able to do just that. We are so heartened that with Supervisor Hilda Solis's leadership, the full Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors unanimously designated unaccompanied women as an official subpopulation, requiring data analysis and research that will unleash the resources so desperately needed. Councilmember Nuri Martinez moved forward a similar motion through the Los Angeles City Council. And now, Downtown Women's Center has sponsored a state bill introduced by Senator Susan Rubio, SB 678. The Unaccompanied Women Experiencing Homelessness Act will make California the first state to recognize women, mandate the collection of data, and set measurable goals towards reducing homelessness amongst this population. Even amidst a moment of extraordinary suffering, passing these local motions and a state bill will allow us to change the lives of over 21,000 women who are unhoused in Los Angeles today. Want to join us in our advocacy efforts to get this state bill passed? Visit us at downtownwomencenter.org and we'll help you get involved.
Thank you, Amy. And now we'll hear from Rhonda Beltran. Rhonda has been a professional fundraiser for over 35 years and started at the House of Ruth in June 2019 as a director of development. She is actively involved in the surrounding communities and has served on various boards and committees. She has dedicated her life to making a difference in the communities in which she lives. Please welcome your neighbor, Rhonda.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Beltran, Director of Development for House of Ruth, and I've dedicated my professional and personal life to helping women and children thrive. I've worked for the past 25 years serving at-risk youth, and I volunteered for Seroptimist International for over 30 years helping women and children. When a position became available at House of Ruth, I had the opportunity to help make change by providing services to survivors of domestic violence. I took that chance. I had a family member that was in a domestic violence intimate partner relationship for many years. I stood beside her. I saw her struggles, her heartbreak, and I tried to provide support whenever she needed it. But it was very traumatic for our family. And so when I had this opportunity to go to House of Ruth and make a difference in lives like my cousins, I took it, and my family was 100% behind me to make this change in my career, both professionally and personally. I was excited to use my passion to help make a difference in the lives of domestic violence survivors and their family. Let me tell you a little bit about House of Ruth. House of Ruth has been providing comprehensive domestic violence services for over 40 years, and it helps 15,000 survivors in that time and community members throughout San Bernardino, Los Angeles, and Riverside counties through their various programs and services. We have a 24-hour hotline that provides crisis intervention services to those in need. We offer a 55-bed residential shelter that provides up to 90 days of programs, and those include food, clothing, personal care, counseling, legal advocacy, and employment. We also provide transitional residency. Our traditional housing project provides survivors assistance the opportunity to develop their skills that will lead to permanent housing and increased income. Permanent housing provides care management and counseling services addressing barriers due to domestic violence and the lack of housing through evidence-based models such as survivor-driven, trauma-informed advocacy, financial assistance, and community engagement. Our children's program provides a 5-day-a-week program that assists children at our shelter to reduce trauma and help with the self-blaming that they experience from witnessing domestic violence at their home or as victims themselves. Our counseling program provides long-term counseling to children who experience domestic violence at home and that come in through our community program. Our counseling is conducted at our shelter and at our Pomona and outreach offices to help survivors plan for a future free of violence and develop ways to achieve those goals. Our community outreach walk-in center serves a diverse ethnic economic community of domestic violence survivors. Services include individual counseling, legal advocacy, and life skills. We also have a prevention educational department that serves our youth, and it helps provide services to break that cycle of abuse. These prevention educators are available to speak about healthy relationships, self-esteem, and warning flags, along with many other topics. I am just so grateful that after this long journey in my career, that I've been able to come to House of Ruth and hopefully make a difference in the lives of domestic violence. I'm grateful that there are agencies like House of Ruth that are dedicated to preventing violence and ensuring the safety and well-being of those impacted by it. My name is Rhonda Beltran, and I'm your neighbor.
Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you so much for your advocacy and your continued hard work to help build up our communities. And now I'm going to introduce today's final speakers, Elise Buick and Evelyn Garcia. Elise is the president and CEO of United Way of Greater Los Angeles. In 2015, she made history by becoming the first woman to hold the post. Under her leadership, UWGLA launched its 10-year action plan creating pathways out of poverty. And now I'd love to speak on Evelyn. Since 2012, Evelyn has led United Way of Greater Los Angeles economic mobility initiatives, stewarding millions of dollars to improve the financial stability of low-income families in Los Angeles County. Please welcome your neighbors, Elise and Evelyn.
Okay, looks like we're on, Elise.
Okay.
Yeah. What brought you to this work and what has kept you in this work?
It's such an important question. I mean, I think for me, I'm originally from Atlanta and moved to Los Angeles with a job, was in the corporate sector. And for me, it was just a desire to want to have more meaning in my life. And so I actually joined the United Way in 1994, and never did I believe I would still be here. And the great gift of joining the organization was my second tour of duty was actually overseeing the community impact department. And it opened my eyes to traversing neighborhoods in LA and really understanding what was at stake. And that mission really carried over to me as I became CEO. And I felt very strongly that we had to take a stand and really be a voice for people that were struggling in poverty. I know you have been with the organization a long time and have risen through the ranks. And so I would love to hear your story about what brought you here and what keeps you here.
My parents immigrated here from El Salvador in the late 70s. There was an impending huge civil war. So their story is very similar to that of a lot of immigrants here in Los Angeles who came from, Mexico and Central America, really looking for a better life, better economic outlook. And so they arrived in the late 70s. It was a different time. The climate for immigration was completely different. They were able to find jobs pretty quickly, although they were undocumented for quite some time. And were able to save a tiny bit of money and get an apartment and eventually a house. And through some large amnesty that occurred in the 80s, they became residents. And I have two sisters, and the three of us were born here. And my parents really are, I think, a story of what can happen when we are inclusive and we provide supports to people who just want to do well for their family. So, that was really a lot of luck on our part that my parents were able to become residents relatively easy when you compare to the path today. And so now I have the honor and privilege of working at United Way to help lift other families out of poverty. My two sisters are teachers. I feel such a debt and an obligation to help other families like my parents, especially when the climate has changed a lot, especially for immigrants, and the ability to get ahead. And, you know, I think this intersection that we're all living right now of race and poverty, and I think gender is another layer there, yes. Right? I think women experience poverty and homelessness in a different way than men do. Obviously, right? I think mothers experience all of that differently than fathers do as well. Not that fathers don't have responsibility and a part in this, but I think just the sheer burden, right? And the sense of sacrifice. I see so much with mothers. It's unbelievable sometimes. I mean, I think of my own mother and all of the things that she did for us. And I see that, right, in other moms who that doesn't seem to change. Socioeconomic level doesn't seem to matter, right, when it comes to that. And it's just, you know, so when I think of when we empower women, when we empower moms, like it really is the key to empowering poor families, right? Like if you can get the mother stabilized and feeling empowered, it really does trickle to the rest of the family. So I see, you know, and especially more and more, right, as women take on more inside, outside of the house and all of that with distance learning. I mean, it really is like heroes doing 5 things at once. So I think, you know, there's, and then when I think of, you know, unsheltered women, right, and the reality, the day-to-day reality that unsheltered women face is so scary and so dangerous.
You know, when I talk a lot to reporters about homelessness, I always say there is a simple part of this equation, and it's money. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I know what's inspiring to me right now is that we are having conversations about public budgets and priorities and budgets, like with Measure J, which, you know, restricted 10% of the county's money on racial justice priorities, including housing. And, you know, people don't realize that the federal government has cut rental subsidies in half. And so this mix of federal, state, county, and city dedication to permanent solutions in housing is so important. And for United Way, where we're now expanding our work, is looking at the affordable housing side. We've been in the chronic homeless space, as you know, but we've got to do more on that. 75% of people who experience homelessness are the people that you're talking about. They're one paycheck away. They're barely hanging on, and then a landlord increases their rent. And for me, what I love about Los Angeles is our diversity. And part of our diversity is we've had diversity of housing, affordable housing, so that different people can live here. And what I'm very alarmed about is people getting displaced. And so that to me is the next thing we all collectively have to focus on, is ensuring we have the money for rental subsidies to make it work for people at all levels of government. But also we have to do bolder things around making sure we have more units of affordable housing. And so, you know, that's something we're looking at United Way through innovative pilots, but also really looking at legislation at all levels of government to get more housing built faster and cheaper.
We really are, I think, at this amazing fork in the road, which is a scary one, but also one filled with opportunities, I think, where we have these, you know, these public resources at a level that we've never seen before. And how do we tap into those in a way that can really make a long-term difference for families? I think the families suffering that are most vulnerable right now were hurting before the pandemic, and now we see them, you know, at a point of no return unless we step in. So I'm really excited, I think, in the next 3 to 6 months around our ability to really maximize and leverage those public resources, something that I think we are particularly good at United Way, given our network of partners and our experience around collective impact. And so certainly a really important point, not only for us, but for the community at large. And so I think in the next 3 to 6 months, we will make a really big difference.
I was talking to some researchers who are we have all these eviction moratoriums in place right now, but when those lift down the road, eviction prevention is going to be so important. And as you well know, there are a lot of people who aren't eligible for some of those funds. And I'm already hearing from researchers that a lot of our Black and brown renters are already behind on rent. And so I think that's something we all have to collectively have on our radar. And I know it'll be a big priority for United Way. And what I think people are finally, you mentioned it, but I think this intersectionality between poverty and racial justice and people seeing that housing justice is racial justice. And to me, that creates a bigger coalition for change. And, that, as you well know, that's how change is possible, when we can build these very diverse coalitions who really want the same vision. And, what we want is a just and inclusive Los Angeles. And so that to me is the opportunity. And it's going to take all of us. And, I'm curious, as we close out, what are things that people that are watching this can do to help as we move forward?
Yeah, I think I always say, and you mentioned it earlier, right? There's a simple answer here, which is money, right? So obviously, I think if people are in a place, even during this pandemic, that they can give, certainly I would encourage that. I think that the amount of work and time it takes to get some of these initiatives off the ground are immense. And so certainly supporting your United Way or other organizations in your community that are doing really good work is always important. And then also, there are another gift United Way has given me is seeing the power firsthand of organizing and advocacy, especially grassroots level advocacy. I think what we've seen in the last year or so, like with Measure J, that's amazing, right? What a win, and a win that really started within the community. And so I would encourage people to find what speaks to them, right? Like, we can't do everything, but we all have something that speaks to us. And that might be, your neighborhood, your tenants association, your neighborhood council, your, a service provider that you want to volunteer at. But I really think that a lot of magic happens when you find like what speaks to you and aligning yourself with that.
Change happens with how I talk to my neighbors and what I put on Nextdoor as a response, and how neighborhood councils, how city councils hear from their constituents. So, we are going to need everyone to really, at the end of the day, housing gets done at the neighborhood level. So we're going to need everyone to help us really convey that we need more options for families and individuals and our frontline workers who finally are being saluted during this pandemic, that they should be able to live in their neighborhood. And right now they don't have many options. And I think that's the promise. And I just want to, as we close, thank all the amazing women who speak today, are part of the program and are watching. And to thank you, Evelyn. Your story inspires me, and I know it inspires everyone watching. And you are an amazing leader, and more of the type of leaders that Los Angeles needs.
My pleasure and my honor to work for you and the organization, and to be able to just give back.
Thank you, Elise and Evelyn. So many people came together to make this afternoon possible, and for that, we are forever grateful. Thank you to everyone who shared such powerful stories. And I want to specifically thank today's partners. Thank you to our co-hosts, Stories from the Frontline. Thank you to John and Marilyn Wells Family Foundation. Thank you to Alexandria House. And thank you to Downtown Women's Center. And again, thank you to everyone who shared such powerful stories with us today. So let's continue the conversation. Join everyone in on March 31st at 5:30 Pacific for an engaging teach-in on the connections between gender justice and housing justice. Visit everyoneinla.org/events to sign up. Thanks again for being with us today. I'm Amber, and I am your neighbor.